Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to Next Gen Discovery. How to find games today. I'm Anthony Mendoza from Exola. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today on this really beautiful sunny day and moderate one of the greatest challenges we have in the game industry today, which is finding your games and discovery. As we know, discovery today is fragmented. Privacy changes have obviously changed the game. Short form video rules the feed, and players spend more time in communities than traditional storefronts. So to unpack all of this, please help me welcome the three experts on the panel today, Magali, Lennon, and Khalid, and I'll allow them to make introductions. So please, Magali, take it away.
Much. Oh, does that work? Okay. Hi, I'm Magali. I head up the global gaming strategy for Tetsu. It's a big advertising group. I spent the past 15 years working in gaming, when from working for games publishers, developers to platform with YouTube gaming for a while before I joined Dentsu. And yeah, I'm excited to be talking with you all today.
But hi, I'm Lennon. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Windwalk. We have a platform called Harbor.Gingy, which is an environment to create awesome player hubs for your communities.
Hey, my name is Khalid. I'm the founder of Scorespace, and I run a vertically integrated game jam studio where we run monthly events and publish the best games from those events on distro activities.
Well, again, thanks guys for joining me. So let's just start broadly. How or where are players discovering games now in 2025? So Magali, let's start with you. As you work at Dentsu with major publishers and developers all over the world, where are you seeing players discover games, and what's that discovery mechanism now?
Yeah, I love that question because I think that today we're very lucky that there are so many channels and places for discovery, right? There are a lot of challenges, but there are many, many channels. I like to think about discovery almost like a loop. And so let me start by talking about format, maybe first and foremost. I think about short form content that helps light that spark. Then I think about search and long form that really helps seal the deal, and the community that helps people really stay and stick around. And with that short form content, I mean, we talked about it earlier, right? Like you think about the TikTok of the world, the YouTube shorts, and it's thinking about content differently because you think about making your trader vertically, right? About discovery. And you need to think about those couple of seconds to hook people in. And I think that's the key to really just make this format work, right? Um, Additionally, I think we need to think about other spaces. So today, UGC ecosystem is like Roblox or Fortnite UAFN are big discovering play. And I think it can be counterintuitive to think about that, right? Because we think about players evolving in a different ecosystem that's not yours. But I truly believe that today, play and creation and participation is a new awareness mechanics that everyone needs to embrace. So think about UGC as like new channels and new platform. Um, and include that as part of your strategy. And then obviously you have your Discord and your Reddit, where word of mouth and community needs to be at the heart of thinking about how do you empower that community to actually help you carry similar discovery. uh, and you can't forget about trust, right? I still believe that embargo drags a lot of wish lists. I still believe that discovery is here there. And I know Lennon might talk about that too. The discovery is not one size fits all, right? Like it's very different from whether you're talking about a PC game, a console game, or a mobile game. For CC, you're going to be focused on a sim page and wish lists, whereas for console, you're going to be thinking about platform features, and on mobile, you're going to think about that long lead, uh, like ongoing contents as like a way for you guys to bring back people in that way. No matter what you do, the key, and that's how I also set up strategies for our client, whether they're on DBT Gaming or on DBT Gaming, is thinking about how do you harness the platform native features and really lean into it to craft something that's customized to you.
Oh, those are all great points. And something that occurred to me is that it almost has to reflect culture, right? What's happening in day to day. So, I mean, Lennon, that's something you're really familiar with your work with Harbor GG. I mean, what are you seeing, and how are players discovering new games from your point of view?
Discovery and learning about the games, YouTube and TikTok are still king at the moment. But what we're seeing is that more and more Megali's point, UGC is a bigger component of that, and it blurs the lines even further because now we have players who are clipping content and you're sharing content, and they're creating the body of the awareness that's existing on those YouTube and TikTok platforms more so than maybe when you're on traditional trailer might push. Trailers are still super effective when it comes to large AAA products that they often have a little bit of budget restraints, as I'm sure we all are aware of to some extent, in terms of getting above the line and breaking through some of the noise. And so relying on that community component and the elevation of the content to do that through those channels is really. And then, of course, when you compare the mobile strategies and PC strategies, they differ significantly. Just said again, between how they sort of those lead ups and those big beats to PC releases, your announcement, your betas, your early access release, and then finally the Roy Auto, relative to mobile, which is very, very reliant upon your performance advertising, effective and your working amounts per.
Perfect. And Khalid, I mean, ending it off with you as a community-driven founder in your company, kind of flipping the script when it comes to discovery. I mean, your perspective is a little bit different than I think, or more or less the same maybe than these two. What do you, from your perspective, right, and your community, how does discovery change and where is it going to?
Yeah, so I think that we know what where people are discovering games, TikTok, YouTube mainly. A lot of what we're doing is sort of validating those like USPs, those core things that are interesting to players early on through gaming jams, because we're sourcing ideas. It will get a lot of volume in, and then able to test those games because of distribution on disparate activities. First game published is at Welcome to Golden Ring. She had the audience to test games repeatedly and test in concepts to find what is interesting to players. I think that's like the core of any of this is like, start a product, starts with what you're making. And unless you have an idea of like what your USPs are and what's interesting to players that makes them want to share, then it's hard to develop a strategy about, you need to have an idea that, early on it's hard to do that because you're on community created games that you're publishing usually. So maybe siphoning from an existing game that is out there that's similar to yours. So finding that community, finding that sort of like growing your initial like subset of community off of, and then testing, creative concepts with it's honestly top on T and testing, see one not your name, really getting people to talk about it, whether that's in the initial communities you're building or, comments you're getting on your TikTok you're focusing on YouTube, or it's like getting feedback early and see what you can grow the base of the market.
Super interesting. I mean, obviously discovery looks different from where you sit, right? And actually that connects perfectly to our next driver, which is people fueling discovery, which are the communities and the influencers. So Khalid, let's keep it here with you, as your company is very familiar with this, but like let's talk about influencers and communities, which is arguably like the front lines of discovery nowadays, right? You've turned, like you've mentioned, these organic game jams into some wonderful, wonderful product, of course, with a massive audience without that traditional ad spend, right? So I'm wondering, how do you keep that creator engagement authentic on your platform? And how do you keep people showing their true selves in a world where there's just so much competition and so much out there?
Yeah, so I think that honestly, with the trend of how mostly pop is doing go algorithm driven and away from like the leverage that that followers had is slowly disappearing. Like having a big, following doesn't mean that you're gonna have a lot of views that took off. So I think that designing early on with smaller shares that might not cost a lot to activate can get them play your game, or might play your game free also. But like getting quality content in, and like I said, like sort of the last point is like find your for video concepts there, sort of your core. We can like publish, just get a lot of videos out there, a lot of like volume of content out there, but then leveraging that instead of trying to just get the biggest creators to play your games. I think that's a better strategy overall. And back to community, I think that with course there's all our games are coming out of these game events, so that's sort of a culture that we built over time. So that starts has all our games together. I think that broadly, if you have sort of a way to build an initial culture around what you're making, you can leverage that long term compared to this like making wild titles that don't have built-in AI code. So
Well, I mean, building on that, Lennon, you mentioned co-creation earlier, and you've helped studios in your career always build always-on hubs around their games. So what's your secret, and how do you keep that authenticity alive?
Well, no, authenticity in the community is important to understand what the community is, right? And going to them where they are. And to your point earlier, oftentimes that's in where lookalike subreddits and things that they have affinity for that are closely tied to their game and are trying to develop an audience from that base, right? And then we're seeing more and more today that studios are looking to develop community early on in the development process. It really starts going to your first playtest when you start to bring people in and get that feedback. And those early adopters end up becoming some of your most important core audience that you can build around. So what, often customers start with a group and then sort of grow from there and nurture them. Those creators, those early fans, many times morph into your content creators as well, right? They're creating the fan art, they're doing the posts on your behalf, they're doing the clipping. And you can go back and reward them by bringing them into content creator programs and sort of nurturing that to stay along for the ride and to become your evangelists.
That community is acting as not only acquisition but also retention in every aspect of that, right? Yeah. So I mean, Magli, you've had experience running these major publisher campaigns all over the world, and what separates a creator campaign from feeling authentic from one that feels forced?
That's a great question. First and foremost, it's interesting because today, creator has a very different meaning, right? Like we used to talk about only like influencer program, and it would mean like we're going to pick a couple of different giants, and that's that. Um, I truly believe that today access actually beats spend. And what that means is you are better to engage with people by giving them early access to fields or by giving them something that they really can't buy, right? Uh, and that's going to be way more meaningful and actually drives that authenticity because you know that it's going to be driven by the DNA of the game. And very much like Khalid said earlier, I talk about like the micro match versus mega blast, like 15 beats will actually create more hip for UIP versus two giants. And we very much think about that way, again, for multiple reasons, because today everybody is a creator. Everybody is capable of creating content and putting that out there. And I think we can't dismiss the power of all of that content that exists. So it's thinking about it in a very different way. And I think in order for us to generate the right impact, you don't need to have millions of dollars anymore. You can actually be very pointed and very meaningful by creating, like Lennon said, like your community advocates, identifying who they are, and really just ensuring that you're co-creating together with your community, and you'll be able to create a program that will influence and generate the sort of impact that you're looking for.
Yeah, in my time at Exola, I've seen that not only authenticity, community, and data-driven creative all intertwine, right? They all mix together and they all go together in one way or another. But that also brings us another challenge in itself, which is our next driver is privacy, right? So we obviously can't talk about privacy without talking about data. Privacy policy first, IDFA, ATT, cookie depreciation. It's kind of changed the way marketing is traditionally done. So Magli, I'll keep it here with you. In your experience, what's still working in that after so much signal has been lost there?
I think so. I think a lot of signal has been lost, but now we need to look at context, creative, and community all together, and that's what represents the new targeting. I believe that it has changed drastically also in the way that you're approaching it. But maybe before we talk about how it's shifted and testing and such, I think it's important to talk about those signals that actually live in pain sites that we often kind of brush aside because we're so used to the one that we were looking for. But now with this challenge, I think about 4 different buckets of those that live in plain sight that needs to be taken into consideration. I think about all of the platform native data that exists, right? So when you look at your Steam page, your wish list, your purchase curves, etc., I think about all of the community telemetry. So when you look at Discord join, topic aids, like all of that is going to be very helpful. Then the third thing I would think about is search and social intents. So think about queries, watch time, And then obviously, like all of your first party touch points with email and events that you put together. And I think the win as data and privacy are getting increasingly challenging is that the win is going to be looking at all of those behavioral breadcrumbs and putting them together and being able to assess what is working versus just doing an IDs. And that's going to help you kind of reassess and give you direction of the future. And with that, it's acknowledging that testing is changing. I think Kelly talked about that a little. It's changing in many different ways, right? So instead of trimming your trader 40 different ways in order to figure out what works or not, I think it's thinking about how can I test different concepts. So how does mechanic A versus total B versus, a different creative actually works? And it's also about setting up some sort of rule set about how you go about creative now, right? Because creative matters more than ever. And so I think a lot about creating what I call creative taxonomy so that you can share this learning across assets and across team, and truly, find out what is meaningful across those compounded um, different KPIs that you can actually assess versus just looking at clicks.
Well, it's interesting to say that because essentially creative testing has become the new targeting, right? And Lennon, I mean, with Windwalk and Harbor GG's first-party community data, how are you helping developers leverage insight responsibly now in this new landscape?
Thank you for the plug. It's actually exactly what we do, though, is that we believe fundamentally that it's time for developers to take back some of that customer relationship, right? And that's direct-to-consumer channels that are opening up. And it's also developing that rapport with your audience, with your fans, and having that direct connection to them. It's not that the platforms don't provide us with a ton of information that we want, but when we're able to connect all of the other social activity from our audiences into one unified view, you can start to see what that social graph looks like specific to your game. And it doesn't necessarily replicate or replace what we used to get with something like IDFA, but it does give you enough information to make informed decisions about where your media budget should be going.
Well, I mean, continuing the plug theme here, Khalid, with Scorespace being built around those feedback loops, how do you test now new concepts and creatives in that environment
without the usual ad metrics, as you really know it to us. Yeah, so initially, it's a lot of the sort of our loop is we run the game jams, we get initial rating period where we'll get the best hits from there. The developers choose best styles. That's one stage. Then we sign best games through the air, so usually like 2 big games we sign. And then after that, we push the games on the Discord exit piece, and then we're able to test that game directly in the environment that we want to scale on. And that's sort of something that we do in volume because, like I said earlier, we're trying to find styles that we can validate early that makes sense to scale. So putting this time and effort to title that may not could be best concept to do forward with, find that early. And I think that a lot of it isn't necessarily just metrics. It's more so like, because that early on, you're able to talk to your players directly. You get real qualitative feedback instead of just KPIs early on. And I think that's really valuable is sort of seeing how players feel about your game thing, seeing what like I said, what's the most interesting about your tile, and this getting a sort of a holistic view on what you're building really early on so that you can, plan the rest of that and then see, what is needed to get that game to that next level where you feel comfortable scaling. A lot of what we're doing right now in regards to privacy is the building, not really privacy, but building an account system so that we're able to target users on all that that we're publishing on. This week, like I said, are made by home sister activities. I think someone mentioned earlier Reddit doing something as well. They're building a platform, group publishing there, review publishing crazy games. All these platforms, they're all web games that are published on these sort of instant games platforms that are out there. And one of our main goals is to build a distribution network so that we can, reach out to all these developers, all these players, all those different platforms, and then be able to direct them to where, a new game that we're launching And the only way you do that is to build a council sync over time that we can leverage to sort of jumpstart our new styles of motion.
Yeah, all those perspectives kind of show when Discovery is heading some backstride, and because what the traditional data disappears, rather, AI is stepping in and filling that gap, right? So let's talk about the future and how AI is transforming everything, including Discovery, from Korean testing to obviously recommendation engine. Lennon, let's stay with you really quickly. Winwalk's been experiencing the AI-driven moderation and recommendation problem.
How do you see your adaptation in Discovery? What do you see about it?
I think AI is going to have a huge impact on discovery. First of all, with the influx of creator tools, there's going to be an influx of new titles. And that wave of new titles is going to impact the clutter that exists on our primary discovery channels of the day, right? And so it's going to shift the size of audiences that we're trying to build for each of our products into finding what are effectively that 1,000 true fans type model, right? That core base that we're going to have, and then to leverage them from there. I think that there's going to be a lot more content with hopefully some distribution of wealth as well in the process.
AI is discovery of irons.
It's a discovery multiplier for sure. I mean, it also provides us with a ton of information around, creative optimizations and an acceleration of our creatives that we're building for each one of our campaigns. Additionally, it's also going to give us the ability to have a very, very deep sense of sentiments within our audiences. We're using those tools already today to understand exactly what the tone of the discussions are happening in the Discord channels, on the YouTube comments, and then within Reddit.
Well, and Natalie, Jinsu's exploring with AI-generated Korean testing, as I understand, right? How do you see AI change, or how studio will find their better?
Yeah, I see that next generation of discovery to be very much more personal thanks to AI. I think we're going to be able to better match those micro tastes to micro moments, and so it's almost creating a different conversation for brands and for studios. It's thinking about how can I be extra clear about my value proposition so that I make it very clean for any AI system to actually pull my content and know exactly what I stand for and be able to find my people. But I think that next step in discovery with AI is all about like extra personalization. And again, just making sure that your promise is not fuzzy so that the feed can actually target the right community and help you out with that. So it's almost like, how can you think about like helping yourself from the get-go by building your own channel, by building your brand, and by giving the right signals out there in order for the new AI and the new feed to actually deliver against the next level of discover.
And a follow-up question on that is like, what are the risks of leaning too hard on those algorithm personalizations, right? Like, what would you advise folks to be cautious of?
So it's interesting because there is always that it's like anything in the world, right? We have the tendency of like being scared of some new product features, and AI is one of them. When I think we all need to lean more and to embrace the spaces more, but again, by understanding that we need to actually have our side of the house really clean and neat. So owning your brand persona, owning your value, your brand proposition, and just making sure that you're communicating that out there in a way that, again, is clear, is giving those toolkit back to the creators, and just letting go a little of the hold that we have as brand. And I see that all over the place, not just on gaming, right? We have that hold over who we are and just making sure that we're evolving in that like neat little box when we need to kind of open out the gates and let the community carry that for us. And I think that a new generation of discovery with AI is less about being worried of leaning in too hard. It's about being really to the more.
I mean, AI can scale reach, it just can't be authentic. Exactly, right. And Khalid, on the indie side, I mean, how are you future-proofing developers? How are developers future-proofing their discovery methods when it comes to we literal world or recommendation systems to solve?
Yeah. So to go on Andy's point, I think that what indies have done really well is finding niches that have upside. And, algorithms naturally niche down. So like if you're able to, target a niche with a unique mechanic and grow from there, I think that's probably the best strategy is to find a way to sort of find a way to get your game sorted with the algorithm into your target audience and grow from there. I mean, that's honestly where a lot of products in general, like as gaming, you start with like a smaller niche and then expand from there. I think that AI is only going to help with that process. But yeah, I'd say overall that's sort of why we've seen indie game starts blow up recently on our own, because like previous talk it mentioned that 2-person teams, like there's a lot of those popping up, and I think that it's not really uh the game as much as it is the algorithms sorting the content to the right audience. And I think that in order to leverage that, you need to make sure that your content is sparking more than enough. But I think that's the most important thing, is like figuring out what is going to get something to talk about your game, because you get sorted into the algorithm to with the right places. But if you're not able to take advantage of that, then it matters.
Well, thanks. The great perspectives on everything from discovery to privacy to communities and influencers to AIs in the future of it. So at this moment, I'd like to open up to the floor and take in questions that the audience may have for our esteemed panel of experts.
So now that we're starting to share our game while it's early development, how do we get over the risk, or I guess the fear, that we're just gonna share too early? People are just gonna steal our ideas, especially in the age of AI, especially since everyone's already stealing everyone's ideas anyway and copying them in Roblox, and just all the kids are playing the free versions anyway. So what do we do in this world?
Well, I mean, the easiest way to solve that is the typical playtest close and tight for a moment, but at one point you're going to want to open it up, right? And I think that it's understanding what component of your experience is going to catch people's attention and retain that attention and get you the feedback that you need to keep your development on track, and enclosing that demo experience into the gates that you're comfortable sharing. At some point or another, though, the games industry is notorious for stealing everybody else's ideas, and everything is somewhat of a copy or a deviation from something else as well. So it's part of the process of the exposure, I think. But if you have that core group that really, really follow you and believe in what you're building, then they will notice, and they will also be more vocal about calling out the copycats that will net with this. It doesn't mean you're retaining all the audience, but at the very least, you're acknowledging them.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. There is no preventing copies. So I think we just need to be okay with that. And it's exactly what Lennon said, like bring some people in early and almost like assign them roles, right? Like have them be the law keeper, the bug hunter, like whatsoever. Create that community that can go out there for you and help you talk about the game, the uniqueness of the game, the beauty of what your game is, and why people should come to you versus any other copycat out there. And then just celebrate that. I would say always focus on that like niche first community that you're going to be bringing into your game, to have very solid advocates, because you're going to create those obsessed people with what you're building. And I always say that I would rather always pick 100 obsessed versus 1,000 curious. And it's so important because obsession compounds and it's going to help you over time. So just focus on that and focus on this next step, but bring them in early.
Regarding copycats, it sounds kind of like you're saying that you have 100 obsessed, that they can in some ways see the people who are curious because of the copycats and then bring them into your venue, I guess, or niche. So is there any other ways that, like, if there's copycats, they can be leveraged actually to, like, bring in interest in the original?
Yeah, to create content around it. If you're vocal about people copying your ideas, then you can leverage that as a point to talk about it. Drone Falls copied by Drone Falls is getting a that blew up on same. It's copied by some old studio that made a copy called K Shot, I think. And that only propelled their popularity because people were like, oh, this game looks a lot like Drone Fall, but they'd reached that point where they, were big enough to sort of defend themselves because they talked about their game, because they released the game or early access building a lot in public. If they hadn't have done that, and if they kept the game post search assets till release, the game wouldn't have blown up the way it did, and it really would got copied, and they would have had no they wouldn't have had any leverage to defend themselves. Let's say we're talking about the game of public.
Sucks.
Signature rule there.
Yeah, a lot of times we've talked about content as marketing content, but and in games they've always had underground mods, people creating actual game content for you as both a marketing exercise as well as increasing the retention of your game. I mean, isn't that more the future? If we're making the tools easier for them to actually make additional actual game content, should you make your games a little more open in that way? Isn't that the future?
I truly believe that it is the future. Yes, I think co-creation is a must moving forward. But co-creation can take many different shape and form, right? Like it can be you opening it up with like a toolkit that you're making available out there and inviting people back in, or it could be just you organizing some listening session for feedback. But it's still co-creation to a degree, right? Something we just talked about with Kelly was also just be very open and public about it, right? Like create those liaison with the community in a way where they know that you're not shying away from potential bugs and things that need to be fixed. Like close that loop in public, right? Show them that you're listening, show them that you're fixing things, show them the receipts, and just bring them along for the journey. But all that is part of co-creation, and I truly believe that it's the future, and that's why you just see it the big.
You should definitely reward them as well.
Yeah, sure. I'd want to just throw a little something on top of that, which is that, like, if anything, those creators are even more voracious than the ones who are building fan art because they're investing into more art, right? And so there's a lot of things that we can do. Obviously, just creating Discord roles and specific areas and channels where you can then harness that environment to come into your discussion and then elevate it. Every time someone is doing something great for you and spreading what you're doing and what you're building, take a chance to bring that person up and give them recognition. It goes a long way, and that acts as a force multiplier around everything that's from Captain Free Car too.
In the back.
Yeah. So considering how important it is to understand, players and community, how useful or even dangerous do you think it would be for studios to create AI synthetic audiences to test their marketing concepts before they go live?
Say that the last part of the question again.
Yeah. So, how useful or dangerous do you think it will be for studios to create synthetic audiences in order to test their marketing concepts before they go live?
That's a really hard question because you can't, even with AI audiences and even with all of the behavioral data that might have out there, you can't really replicate what's going to happen in the wild. There is nothing like, and that's why we keep talking about authenticity, right? Like everyone will be able to like feel something that doesn't feel right, even when a studio feels like, no, we tested it and we were good on audiences. You never know until you use it out there. So that's where I think AI and automatization has some limitation and should be used for creative iteration more than actual audience replicas, because you're not going to be able to get the feedback that will actually take place in real life, right? I mean, let me know if you guys disagree.
I don't disagree. I do think, though, it's actually inevitable that people are wanting to go that route, right? To gather as much information as possible of what your good people could pull and extract from synthetic audiences will give you some indication. But human emotion, I still do root in emotion to some extent, and I do hope that sometimes certain things just carry and create reality beyond what the computers and the machines will tell us.
Professor? Were you guys things?
No. I was just gonna ask you the rolling of UGC. What is the role of like official marketing material going forward?
Well, your brand assets and all of your marketing playbook will still be there. But I just think that, I mean, we all know that depending on studios and publishers, for smaller studio, thing might not be as much of a headache than bigger studios. But when you go through rounds of iteration for like official brand assets, it takes a lot of time, it's really heavy in production costs, and it's unsustainable for most of the game today that have Lighthawks. So most of those games that exist and who wants to keep the lights up and just make sure that they can keep promoting the new content that's dropping in the game and keep engaging with the community. Because again, I think engagement is the name of the game now. You need to think about how do you actually maximize all of the content that exists around your game and that's out there, and celebrate your community, because you're able to do a couple of things by the same token. So it's in your best interest to actually think about, how do I work together with all of my brand assets and all of the UGC content that exists out there and make it work for me on the long run? And that's going to help stretch your marketing dollar and also think about your media budget in a different way.
And oftentimes that comes back, it's in the marketing for sure, right? In terms of the investments that we're making and our initial brand assets, some of our brand style guides, but it also comes back to some concepts, right, within the game themselves. What are components of this product that will drive UGC, right? Now you think about it from a product development stage. Am I making something that the fans will appreciate, if they will catch on to, that they will then echo back into the atmosphere of YouTube and TikTok?
I think we have time for one or two more. Are there any other questions on that side of the room that I would see? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Bagley, Lennon, and Khalid. Appreciate this recap.